It is now recording. We will, in theory, it is now recording as always. I've moved the recording, the folder that these record to from the M.2 drive to a SATA drive. So I don't know if that affects when the file begins or not, but
The most important question, is it an expansion?
wait, is what an expand? I'm so confused.
To go along with our topic tonight. Is the drive
We're,
that this information is being stored to an expansion or DLC?
I mean, I did have to pay for it.
there you go. There, Dirk, keeping it on topic. It took us a minute to get there, but he knew what he was doing.
Come with me on this ride. I don't know where it'll end, but it'll be a trip.
All right. Well, now that we have confirmation that we all sound passable, I guess we will get started. So, here we go. Jam! Nope, I don't like that at all. I'm going to redo that. No, I'm just kidding. I don't redo things. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mana Pool. This is episode 673, I hope, of the Mana Pool, and I am Chewy. I look just like Chewy too. Not the famous one. I look just like me.
You look
enough.
like yourself?
I do.
Good.
Sort of like Brian looks just like himself, only a little bit shorter.
Yeah, they say the camera adds 10 pounds, and no one's ever managed to capture a photograph of me since I had all those pictures of me with long hair destroyed. So, if there isn't a camera on me, does that mean I'm 10 pounds heavier? Think about that while Mike goes.
All right. I'm Mike, the rules guy and the game lore guy, and I guess the proportion of pictures of me without long hair and pictures of me with long hair is slowly shifting towards the latter as I continue to keep my long hair.
Yeah, Brian looks just like himself, only a little shorter. Mike looks just like himself, only with a lot more hair.
I'm Dirk, the self-proclaimed greatest man alive and moral comes to the group, and I don't know. I would say I have a little less hair on top, a little more hair on the face sometimes.
Yeah, Dirk looks just
Maybe
like
it's a little
himself,
bit grayer
but with less hair.
and grayer.
And weirdly, you would think that I was talking about like our cartoon characters here, but I wasn't, although it turns out I think I was. Huh. Anyway, so, whoa. Sorry if that was loud. So, those are the dorks. I am also a dork. We're all dorks here. How are you?
Good.
So this week, we've got a non-magic topic, although magic I'm sure will come up because, magic is just what our topic is now. Not that we only talk about that. What I mean is magic embodies the topic that we have picked today these days.
Yes.
We're talking about game expansions / add-ons stroke DLCs, that sort of thing. I went / and stroke
Right.
just in case there are people from the US and the UK listening. Because they say stroke instead of / and it's very weird.
I did not know that.
I watch a lot of British nonsense.
I mean, I knew
Wait,
about
so do
the
you.
whole biscuit thing, but,
You're a biscuit. Anyway,
thank you.
so this was an idea that Brian had a few weeks ago, but then Mike added onto it and took it in a different direction, and in a completely different direction than the way my brain was going to go. But then we ended up not doing that for reasons. So now here we are. We're going to do it for real, not for play. And yeah, so game expansions. What do we mean by that? What we mean is any kind of addition to an existing game, either board game or video game or war game or, whatever, card game.
Mm-hmm.
The way I thought of it is, think about what's one of the oldest games in the world? Chess. Think about it, if somebody bought the rights to chess, which the lawyer in me, like, my brain splits at that thought, but think, you buy the rights to chess, and then you're like, you know what? We're going to nerf Bishop, and in about 3 weeks, we're going to come out with a new piece, and you can choose to use it or not. So, something like that. You have an existing game, and you're adding on to it. And compare that to, like we were talking about before the show, the different versions of Monopoly. Because there's Monopoly X edition for literally, like, there's probably a Monopoly edition for your hometown, And it's going to play like Monopoly. But these are games with a base game, and then you have things that you add on to it that change the way the game is played.
Yeah.
Fair enough? Ah.
And, like, primarily, I would think these are changes that you need the base game for. So unlike,
Right.
Monopoly Kernersville,
Mm-hmm.
which sadly does exist, I've seen it, where you can just buy that and play it. You don't need the original Monopoly.
Right.
This would be like, well, everyone knows what an expansion is. I don't know why we're spending so much time on this, but
But just distinguishing it from just different games entirely.
yeah, like, especially in the early days of downloadable content, there were some expansions that were sold in physical form that ended up being standalone games. I'm thinking of, off the top of my head, the Grand Theft Auto 4. Grand Theft Auto 4 had 2 big DLCs. Something, I forgot what the first one's called, but the second one was called The Ballad of Gay Tony. And
Oh yeah.
you controlled completely different characters, but they needed the downloadable versions needed the original game to work. But when they released them on consoles, they didn't really feel like making that a thing, so they're just standalone playable games. But they started as an expansion, so they're an expansion. Yeah. So I have a question for you dorks.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a large chunk, like a very large chunk of today, doing research on this. And I want to know what you think is the oldest record of a game expansion. Like, just give me like a decade.
The oldest record of a game expansion.
I'm gonna guess the 1940s.
Okay.
What
With
did Brian
nothing to
say?
back that up.
Brian
The
said the
40s.
40s. What kind of game would that have been, Brian? Just that made you say that? Or were you just pulling a number out of the air?
I was just pulling a number out of the air, trying to think of what games they had back then. Pinochle. I don't. It's hard. I'm not trying to make light of the question. I really don't have any idea, and I feel like any
Where'd
answer
you
I
get that
give,
15 clubs.
any answer I give is actually going to be too late in time. So
All right. How about the rest of you dorks?
I would guess. I would guess sometime in the 1960s, and I'm thinking of some kind of like tabletop war game.
Yep. Okay.
I'm gonna say the Stone Age because the expansion to the wheel was the cart.
but was that a game?
Was the wheel and then the axle came next, which was an expansion.
All right. Remind me to headbutt Dirk next time I see him.
I'm adding it to your agenda, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
So, the earliest game that I could find that had expansions in the way that we mean it now was okay. Forgive the pronunciation. It's a Swedish game. It's called Flood's Kriegspel.
Bork, bork.
Exactly. And I'm just going to read this out as I found it. Flood's Kriegspel is a Swedish strategic World War I war game from 1914.
Oh, wow.
It was
That's-
published as a base game, including a French and a German metal miniatures with instructions what colors to paint them. A French and a German army. I missed a word there. So they're little metal miniatures with instructions for how to paint them. You could order extra armies and navies for other European nations. Each came in a small cardboard box containing miniatures and a sheet of rules for how to add that army/navy to the game.
Wow.
Right?
That. Holy cow! This is. I mean, now I kind of want to play this game. This may have been a mistake. This episode may be a mistake for my budget. I'm gonna go to Carrie tomorrow. I'm gonna be like, we need to buy the expansion for. Say the name again.
Floods, like the word flood, with an S.
Yeah.
Flood's Kriegspel.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell her that I need that game in the expansion, and she's gonna be like, "Yeah." But no, I mean, this sounds interesting. I don't even know how this game plays, but already I'm like, okay.
I mean, it was a tabletop miniatures war game.
1914.
Yeah. And I saw a lot of people talking about war games from like the 30s and 40s. But this one, someone was like, I could beat that. Hang on a minute. And they had some screenshots of like the order sheet, because it had listed in Swedish what came with each or what came with each thing when you ordered it. And I was like, that's completely insane. So yeah, this is a far older idea than I thought. I know that various board game companies were selling expansions in like the 60s and 70s
Yeah.
fairly regularly. But
That's fascinating.
Isn't
Really
it?
cool.
And to think-
1914, that
and-
isn't very long at all after
And
the events you're replaying.
right, that's kind of what I'm thinking is like this is
Because it was
like
the new
real
hotness,
time.
Mike.
Yeah,
I asked Squee. I tried to get Squee to come on the show, but unfortunately he had other plans tonight. But Squee said that board game expansions, just as a random aside about board game expansions, get less reprints and become a pain in the ass to track down if you miss them. And depending on who's making the expansion, you can run into board/deck/pieces bloat that make it harder to set up and to find space to set up or store. But he said it's also what makes games like the Arkham and Eldritch Horror games keep going for so long.
right.
And he also pointed out that so the rule of thumb that I keep hearing for board game expansions is from the point of view of new players, like a new board game group or whatnot. And it's you don't buy the expansions. You don't need the expansions. Find out if your play group likes the game first,
Yeah.
and then buy the expansions. But Squee had a counterpoint to that. He's like, if you're an established like board game person and you already have the expansions, he mentioned Battlestar Galactica board game. He said he's only played it with all the expansions because those people had all the expansions. And he said trying to play it without it is frustrating because the game expands it so much and adds useful things.
Oh, so the expansions included quality of life improvements.
Apparently so. But he also mentioned another weird problem. Like, this is kind of a niche problem, but he said he backed the Dresden Files board game on Kickstarter years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And as new books came out, new expansions came out that essentially were based on the books, but you can't play those with people that haven't read the books yet. So he's like, I've got like 6 expansions for the Dresden Files game that I've never played because my play group hasn't read them yet, but didn't want them spoiled. I was like, that's rough.
Well, they need to get their asses in here.
Right?
That's kind of a limiting factor right there. Yeah.
Like, I'm on book 12 right now, which is, I think, the highest number that Squee mentioned. So I guess I could play with him. I haven't finished book 12 yet. But anyway. So yeah, board game expansions are totally a thing. And they're unnecessary unless they are?
Fair enough to say, I guess.
Yeah. Like, I asked people for, like, what are some good ones and why. But before I get into that, what you guys have any board game? I don't play board games, like, at all. I guess because the only board games I've ever played were bad. You know, like, the stuff we all played as kids, Sorry and Trouble and Monopoly and Clue, like those from a board game perspective for people that play board games all the time, those games are terrible. No offense to people like Brian who are like, but I love Sorry. Shut up, Brian. But
I'm not a big fan of Sorry.
Yeah.
I enjoy Monopoly, which is a point of contention sometimes, but and I enjoy Risk. But no, I'm so as an example of one to me, for a lot of my life I'd heard about Settlers of Catan, and I hadn't really played it. And then a couple of years ago, I had asked for it for Christmas. I was able to get it, and my family pretty well fell in love with it. We started playing the heck out of it during quarantine, and so really enjoyed it. And then so later on, we got the expansion, the Seafarers and Settlers. Mike, you know the name of this one.
Seafarers,
Said-
the boats.
Is that the name of the expansion?
Yes, it's called
I'm trying to remember.
Seafarers of Catan. Yes.
Seafarer, yeah, okay. And it adds a couple things to it. Fairly importantly, that it adds sea tiles and it adds extra mechanics to it. Like there's additional ways to get the points that you need to win the game, because the game is very much based around you get points for doing the stuff that the game wants you to do, and then the person who gets up to X number of points first just wins the game. And before, in the original one, it's all about like building roads, building townships, things like that. And then this is you can sell fish, and you can catch pirates, and you can mine spice, sweet spice. So it adds mechanics to it, which I really enjoy. And Carrie has found that is actually her favorite way to play the game. And going off of what Chewy said about expansions earlier, you need to have the original base game to play, because this only adds additional pieces to make the board that and it uses ones that you've already got in the base game, and then it says make sure you pull this and this and this out of the base game and then add pieces X, Y, and Z. And that actually works pretty well. But as Squee was kind of mentioning when he talked about his comment earlier, it is a bit much if you're trying, and this is one of my kind of maybe not complaints, but concerns with board game expansions, is if you're trying to keep like the separate games at least a little intact, if you ever think you're going to play the original way, so to speak, again, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt. You know what I mean?
that is another thing Bill mentioned, that if you want to play a game you've already got the expansions all in for, and you want to play the vanilla version, he said it is a large pain to go through and pick out all of the pieces or cards or whatever that aren't part of that aren't part of the base game.
Exactly.
Yeah. For ones where it's designed where it's like obvious which ones are new, it helps. Like for Trogdor,
Nah.
yeah, Ashley got me the expansion, and some of the expansion is just more cards that go in the main action deck that people draw off of. And there's nothing, super crazy about them. They're just cool and different. But there are some brand new mechanics that are represented by completely different cards with like different backs that go in different places. So it's easy to set those aside if you're not going to bother with them.
Okay.
But yeah. So I enjoy Catan very much. I enjoy the Seafarers expansion very much. And I think it's a great way to get more use out of something that we enjoy. But the tracking is kind of a hassle.
All right.
I have another game in mind, but you know what? This episode is not just me talking, so somebody else's comments.
Okay, so because I know he is a massive board game guy, I poked Omar Hernandez on Twitter, and he said it's a tough question for board games. Some expansions are fantastic because they just give more. Others expand the play in new and interesting ways. And there are a good number that almost act like patches to make the full game better or more complete. And he said, like, the Norwegians expansion to A Feast for Odin is great because it expands the choices in the game and makes options that weren't great before just as valid. The expansions for Dune Imperium give you more with only a little bit of rules overhead. The expansions for Grand Austria Hotel, these are all board games I've never heard of, is fantastic and modular. It lets you add what you want in piece or in whole, expanding the game in several different ways from a little bit to a whole lot. Marvel Champions LCG puts out a new character and or story box every month or so. So more. Let's see. And then, hang on. These are video games. These are still video. Here we go. Greg jumped in, Mad Stork MSU on Twitter. And he said, Terraforming Mars Prelude reduces the playtime by jumpstarting each player's engine in a big way. He said, I love Terraforming Mars, but the games can really drag. Prelude makes the game much more palatable. Roll Player, ROLL, is a game based, you guys might like this, a game based around building a D&D character. He said it's really puzzly, but can feel very samey after a few plays. Monsters and Minions, the expansion, gives you something to do with the character you just built while spicing up the gameplay. Ganymede is a game that has an expansion called Moon. And it said Moon gives Ganymede a bit more complexity, which eliminates a bit of the monotony of the base game. I love Ganymede, but it's a bit too simple for experienced game groups, and the Moon expansion fixes that. Let's see here. Games that incorporate expansions into the base game, like Viticulture Essential Edition, which makes the Tuscany expansion evergreen. So it's like for video games, you buy like the Game of the Year edition that has all the DLC already added in.
Right.
Apparently they can do that with board games too, which is a trip. And the last thing he said here... Unfortunately, I don't get to play many board games enough to even consider an expansion. Games like Lords of Waterdeep and Wingspan have, quote, essential, end quote, expansions, Skullport and Oceania, respectively, but I haven't played them enough to justify expanding, which that goes back to the first thing I said about the board game expansions, which is don't buy them unless you know you're going to like them.
Right.
So, yeah. But from what I can tell, the board game, at least from these two people's responses and the ones you guys have said, the ones that people enjoy add more or better or clearer or, faster or whatever, but it tweaks the gameplay. It's not like, oh, now here's a pink piece for $3. Like it's like, oh, I love pink pieces.
Can I get this season's exclusive piece?
Sorry, no, you missed the window for that.
Oh, dang it. I knew I didn't get a high enough rank.
So,
Um,
yeah. What else did you
I
have,
guess
B?
the other one that comes to mind for me is also right around quarantine. I think right before we picked up the game Hogwarts Battle, which, surprise, surprise, is based off of Harry Potter, but it is a board game that also it's cooperative. So you and up to I think it's up to 3 or 4 players are basically trying to all win together. Um, versus just the the bosses, the enemies, the bad dudes, the villains, and you also have, depending on the character you play, you also have a pre-made deck. And as you go through the game, you actually have the opportunity to or purchase from the game as you're playing it additional cards that then go into your deck to draw to be able to use later. It's really fun. It's really innovative. They've put out several um, expansions that give the game more mechanics. They give you more cards that you can purchase to play in your deck. There's one that adds like a potions sub theme so that you can collect potions ingredients and use those cards. There was one that added the monster book of monsters and creatures to the villains. But kind of going back to what I was saying before, it does get to be a bit much to try to keep track of all of these separate expansions and take those cards out if we just want to play the base game or anything like that. Plus, the base game literally has 7 different versions of year 1 through year 7, so
Hmm.
complexity. Carrie once did tell me that the game, in addition to just learning how the game works, the game could be potentially very interesting in a digital format where the game would keep track of a lot of the moving parts for you, including setup and breakdown, which I agree. And I think I don't want to be lazy and be like, oh, everything's better if it's a video game, but it is convenient that video games do take care of a lot of the upkeep for you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, in
Yeah, and there are a
addition to
lot of
table space.
video game or board games that have been converted to digital, and there's even tabletop simulators, so you can do that yourself if it's
Hmm.
not already available. Also, so you can play with people online, which is also huge.
Yeah. So, yeah, something else to think about. That was another example from my own life and highlights some of the difficulties there. So, but as easy as it would be to play digitally and the advantages that brings, there was something that really, and I using the past tense, we still play these games, but not like we did a couple of years ago. There's something about the tactile experience of the three of us sitting around the table, or then even last time we got together, the what like 5 or 6 of us that played a little bit of Trogdor, just being around the table and like interacting with each other in person
Hmm.
and like feeling the stuff, feeling it. I'm not a what's the name for a person that's a technophobe? What is that?
A
You know,
Luddite.
I'm not a luddite. I love me some electronics and whatnot, but it was it they it definitely has a unique experience as well being in person. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of my take on the physical games and whatnot.
Yeah, chat brought up. Let's see. Last said the river expansion to Carcassonne was such a great addition that they added it to the base game. That's cool. Stark, hey Stark, said Smash Up is a boxed card game. In other words, a full game that comes in a box. But new expansions just add new factions for more combinations. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, card games, while we're on expansions for tabletop things, yeah, card games are. I guess card games are like the tabletop equivalent of a live service game, aren't they?
Uh,
So maybe we should save that. But like Magic, as we know, Magic started with Alpha and then Beta and Unlimited. Those were just iterations on the same set. And then they produced expansions. And the first expansion was what, Arabian Nights?
Arabian Nights.
And what is the story there, Mike, that I know you know?
The story there, well, first it was kind of made in a hurry. It's only 70 something cards because they wanted to get something onto the market fast. Because people really, really wanted more Magic. But one of the early ideas that Richard Garfield had was for the Arabian Nights expansion to be distinguished by a completely different card back, like a purple and gold. And that was for the express purpose of making them identifiable, so people could choose to exclude them from their games. He was coming at this from kind of the angle of a, board game expansion type thing, trying to make the pieces distinct if you didn't want to play with them in your game. But early response to that idea was kind of negative. So we have what we have now, which is everything has the same card back, and expansions are identified by symbols on the front, just so you know where stuff came from.
Yeah. And now they're locked into a card back that they actively hate.
Yeah, it's not the best design. It has some actual mistakes on it, just baked into the print. But hey, it's what we have.
Yep.
And that's why we've got the digital games like Arena, where they can just manufacture card backs for you to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Ow. Ooh, Stark has an interesting thing here. But, okay, wait, before we get to that. So, yeah, Magic had Arabian Nights. It was going to be a standalone expansion. And then they released a few more. And then Ice Age came out, which was the first actual standalone expansion.
Yes, meant to be possible to play completely on its own. They even made the point of reprinting certain staple cards and printing and doing functional reprints of other staple cards. They did reprint things like Disenchant Giant Growth, and then they have cards like Fyndhorn Elves, which is basically Llanowar Elves, just with a different name.
Yep. And then, let's see, what was after Ice Age? Homelands.
Ice Age,
Homelands,
and then Alliances. Well, it went Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, Ice Age, Homelands, Alliances. No, wait, I missed the Dark and Fallen Empires.
Yeah, they were after Legends.
Yeah.
So, my point is, there were then smaller expansions again.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess they hit on the idea of blocks. Because then we had Mirage, which was another big set, meaning a standalone expansion that could be played by itself because it had all the stuff. And then 2 expansions for that, Visions and Weatherlight. And then it sort of just
they
became one big game. On purpose.
Right.
I think I'm pretty sure Mirage still in the marketing still said standalone expansion. But I don't think Tempest did.
No. Its marketing was about it being part of the Wrath cycle.
Yeah. But now, card games of all sorts. That's why I said they're basically the analog version of live service games. Because if you want to keep playing with other people, you gotta keep buying in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, you can just play with the cards you've got, as long as you're not trying to play, in sanctioned tournaments and whatnot, then you're good. If you're just playing with people, then it doesn't matter what cards you have.
Right.
And it's neat that I haven't bought but a few packs, not even packs, honestly, I've only bought a few things, period, since like I think Strixhaven was that. I went to one pre-release at some point. No,
I
it wasn't
missed Strixhaven
Strixhaven.
completely. Were you there with us at Throne of Eldraine?
No, maybe.
No, because
Yes.
that's when Oko appeared. Yeah.
Yes. I was. That might be the last one I went to. No, I went to Ikoria. No, I didn't because the world ended.
Yeah.
No,
Throne of Eldraine.
nobody went to Ikoria.
I think I missed Theros Beyond Death.
I was sad about missing Theros Beyond Death. I had some kind of conflict.
I think, and so yeah, I haven't picked up any Magic at all since Throne of Eldraine, and that was whatever I got at the pre-release. But like, I'm still perfectly capable of playing Magic with these dorks if I wanted to, which is their whole, business model of you can. Well, now their business model is the live service FOMO thing. But before that, it was, if you want to keep current, then buy new stuff. And if you don't, it's fine. All your old cards still work until rules change. Then some old cards don't work the same. But
Yes. It's not like they just stop functioning. It's not like they turn into complete bricks.
yeah.
Well, okay, maybe some have,
But yeah. It would be weird for us to not mention Magic. And then there's all of the side things, which are they're not exactly expansions in the way we mean, but there's stuff like Plane Chase and
Conspiracy.
yeah.
Well,
Not conspiracy.
conspiracy. Well,
Arch
but
enemy.
the
That's the one.
conspiracies of conspiracy, maybe just
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, Plane Chase, Arch Enemy, even EDH to a certain extent, just because the way that commanders work and brawl. But
Yeah. Those
different ways of playing.
for video game, like the video game equivalent, I would say those are user created mods. And we'll get into it in a minute, but much like Team Fortress or Counter-Strike, they were picked up by the company that made it and
Yes.
became official.
League of Legends, or was that was based off of something else, right? So
Yeah, that's sort of different
okay.
because like the MOBA is a completely different genre of game entirely. But that started also,
Yeah.
like you said, as a user generated mod that
Yeah,
became its own thing.
Defense of the Ancients.
Yeah. But okay, there's our obligatory Magic reference. So should we get into video games? Because this is where things start to get weird.
Yeah, let's get into video games.
All right.
I had some board games also.
Oh,
Dirk?
Will.
Okay.
Dirk learned how to talk.
Well,
what you
I
got
didn't want to
then?
interrupt you guys.
I think there was at least one point where I was like, I'm done talking, and then I kept going later. So, Dirk.
Yeah, and then nobody said anything, so we moved on. So, Dirk, what have you got for board games then?
Well, there's Ticket to Ride was the one that my son really enjoyed, and there's multiple versions of it, such as there's the European Ticket to Ride, there's the American one, the Germany one, but they're sort of standalone. But apparently they released an expansion where you can have any of them, and then you add, I guess, countries, territory. There's something where you add part of the map, and I guess it extends the map, or something where you're able to expand the number of routes that go into this game. Because the whole point of Ticket to Ride is you're trying to complete a route. So you draw a card. So at the beginning of your turn, you have a couple things. You can either play cards to complete a route, or you draw cards, and when you get a certain combination of colors and everything, if a route has 4 red blocks to it, you have to have 4 red cars to then to lay claim to that route. And the whole point of it is you get destination cards such as you have to get from New York to LA, or um, St. Paul to Atlanta, and there are different routes you can take to get from point A to point B. Your goal is to complete that route, to have a route that goes from that first one to your other destination. And if you do, you earn points. And if you don't, you lose points at the end of the game. At the end of the game, once you're out of pieces and everything, that's when one of you is out of pieces, that's when the game comes to an end. And whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. So this allowed for expansions to, I guess, increase the number of routes. So that way you can, find other ways of getting from point A to point B, but also means that there are more points that you can earn, and extends the life of the game a little bit to make it run longer, I think was sort of the point of these extra maps. And I guess before we get to video games, there's also figures, like miniature figures and everything, that are kind of like board games. And an example of that was I used to play MechWarrior Dark Age back in the day. And that one was just like the BattleTech game, where you would have a map that you would have out. It was you versus somebody else. You'd have a battle force with a certain size to it, and using the territory and everything. The whole point was to win an objective that was either narrative driven or just in a straight up battle. Who's the last one standing? Well, in the MechWarrior one, or in MechWarrior Dark Age, you have it was put out by WizKids, and they were known for the clicks. Theirs were click based. So at the base of it, there was a little dial that you clicked, and there were stats on the click. So you started off on your home one like fully, pristine, and then as you took damage, you would click the base down until your character was out. And that was the one I did, and the figurines had certain movement points and firing and heat and all kinds of stuff. Well, the original was called Dark Age, and it's set at the beginning, like after all the events that took place in the BattleTech universe. It started fresh, and essentially there's a big problem arose, that the only way systems can talk to each other is by hyperpulse technology. And what ended up happening is that technology failed. So now nobody can talk to each other, and because of that, the major factions have sort of risen up and been like, hey, since nobody's looking, I'm going to reach for these worlds. And it ended up resulting in a whole lot of upheaval. Well, that game ended up with several expansions. I played Fire for Effect, Death from Above, the Liao Incursion, Counter Assault, and the last one I played was Falcon's Prey. So that was the original one, had 5 expansions before they redid the rule sets and rechristened it Age of Destruction. And with that one, they still had the old rules, but they included having pilot cards and special weapons that you could add to the figures, the battle mechs, to go with the system. And they included additional factions that were playable in it, but you had the original rule set and several expansions that came with it, and then they redid they didn't rebuild it from the ground up, but they added additional mechanics that were not in the original one, that added more flavor, and like was talked about earlier, that it made the game so you could customize it a little bit more than before, where it was just if you wanted a specific figure, you had to go and buy up packs until you got that figure. You had to trade somebody for it. Whereas With the new system, if you wanted a special configuration, you just had to have the cards for it, the figure you wanted, and then if you got the ammo cards for it, then you could, deck your mech out the way you wanted. An additional one, I never played it, but I had an interest in doing it, was Star Wars Armada. And
Is this
that
another
one,
miniatures game?
it's another miniatures game. And that one, again, set in the Star Wars universe, you'd have there's a playmat that has, these guys can only go this far and everything. But it had the capital ships, the fighters, and again, it's set in the Star Wars universe. There's the base one, the core set, that was released in 2014. And then there were multiple waves of expansions that added old ships from Legends, but also added a lot of the new stuff as well that was coming out from Rebels, the Rogue One, because the Hammerheads are an expansion in there, and so was the Profundity. And then the Starhawk was also added in, and then they also included Clone Wars stuff as well as expansions to it. So it came not as an expansion, but in waves of figures. And then they added an expansion to it as well, which is the Corellian conflict, which in itself had additional things that went with it. So those are just a couple that I had an interest in that were board games either I played or ones that I've seen expansions to that were considered board games or tabletop games.
Yeah, like all of the miniatures games work like collectible card games because you have to acquire new pieces, which that's what cards are in Magic. They're just new pieces to play with.
Yeah, it's just that these are three-dimensional and take up more space.
Yeah, and
The difference.
I'm gonna guess when you said that the Star Wars Armada game had an actual expansion, in addition to all of the new pieces and whatnot, that would be new maps or rules or something. Oh, you said
I
you
think
didn't play
it's
it,
just
so
campaign expansions is what it was. So these actually added here's the setting, and we're going to put you into a situation like the BattleTech ones. Those have they have expansions that come out for them where here's a historical event in the universe, and we're going to say, okay, during this event, you will start with this map, and you'll have these pieces. Your opponent will have these, and here's what's going to happen: is at turn this one, this thing's going to happen, and you either need to achieve this objective, or the opponent wins. So it puts you in a position of here's what's happening. Can you win in a situation where in the canon they did not, or will you again fall to the forces of the other? It's just it puts you in. It's kind of like some of the video game expansions where here's this thing, we're gonna set all these rules and set all this. Can you win with these resources where in history they did not?
Right.
gotcha.
I'll get to that sort of stuff later on.
I'm reminded of the scene in Gladiator where they were supposed to be portraying, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but some famous battle, and because of one of the gladiators, actually really knowing as a general how to fight, the end of the enactment went exactly the way that history did not, and I think the Caesar turns to his advisor. He's like, I think my history is a bit rusty. Aren't they supposed to lose? So, something like that.
Yes. All right, let's get to video games.
All right.
we gotta. I pick on Brian for not being able to abbreviate things. Holy crap, Dirk. So, video games decided to take a similar tactic to board games and release expansions. And like the earliest thing that I could find that was a video game expansion as a new campaign was for a game called Dungeon Quest. DunjonQuest, one word. The Upper Reaches of Apshai from 1981. It was a PC game that had new expansion released for the game that required the base game. Which I thought was pretty cool. The first expansion, now this is all coming from a single thread with a whole lot of people on some forum that was just full of what are those things called? Signatures for profiles that had just horrible racist bigotry in it. So I'm not going to put a link to that anywhere. But this is what they came up with. The first expansion that was new content for the game, not a new campaign, but added on to the existing game, was Populous: The Promised Lands in 1989. And I found this in some article somewhere too. So,
I didn't know Populous was that old.
1989. Yeah, Populous was one of the early. It was like the first God game, I think, maybe, or the first one that anyone remembers.
It's the first one I remember.
The first free DLC that was a separate campaign was either Team Fortress Classic in 1999. But since that's kind of borderline for what the person was asking, because that's, a multiplayer mod for Half-Life, essentially. The one that everyone agreed definitely counted was Witch's Wake for Neverwinter Nights in 2002. So, that's cool. The first free DLC that was new content for the original game was Christmas Pack 1 for Creatures, a game from 1996. I've never heard of that. I got nothing. The first paid DLC that was a new campaign was Kingmaker for Neverwinter Nights in 2007. And the first paid DLC, at least in this Twitter thread that anybody could come up with, and they were all digging throughout the internet trying to find it, was... So the first paid DLC that was new content for the base game was the Cuss Pack for Redneck Rampage in 1997.
The Cuss Pack?
Yup. And it is exactly what you think it is.
It let you say bad words?
Yeah, I think it made the characters say bad words.
Is this like unlocking blood in Mortal Kombat?
Yeah, except you had to pay for it instead of just entering the code. What's that, Dirk?
What was the first expansion?
The first expansion, as new campaign, was 1981 Dungeon Quest: Upper Reaches of Apshai. I don't know what actually, Upper Reaches of Apshai might be the expansion. I'm not entirely sure. And the first expansion that was just new content was Populous in 1989.
Okay.
Why did you have something in mind that's actually way later than that?
Well, it was relatively. Warcraft 2 came out in 1995 and had an expansion that came out the next year. So it was Tides of Darkness was the original one,
Yep.
and then the year later was Beyond the Dark Portal.
Yep, I have that in my notes here. That was a pivotal turning point for companies realizing exactly what they could do with expansions, because Blizzard released Beyond the Dark Portal, which was more. It continued the story for Warcraft 2, and I think it had new units or something also.
I think so.
It did.
But you had to have the original game to play it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
I forgot that was an I forgot that was an expansion because I think I got those in the box set.
Yeah. I'm sure I distinctly remember seeing them sold together later. So, yeah.
Right.
But, yeah, that is when everyone, sat up and started paying attention because, oh, we could do that and we don't have to make a whole new game? And the people that play this game will almost certainly buy it?
Because they already have it, and it's more of the stuff that they want.
Exactly.
Okay, so what year was Beyond the Dark Portal?
95.
95. Oh, okay.
Were you thinking of Hellfire?
Yeah, Hellfire was 98.
Oh, was it? I had
Yeah.
97, but okay.
No, wait, I'm sorry. It was released in a bundle in 98.
Ah, okay.
But
Yeah.
that's interesting because that Blizzard did Beyond the Dark Portal, but Hellfire, it was published by Sierra Online.
Yeah, and developed by someone else entirely.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Like, Blizzard didn't do Hellfire. I didn't write down who made it.
Synergistic Software.
Ah,
Sierra
there you go.
division.
But yeah, they outsourced their expansion to Diablo because, but they were busy making Diablo 2, so we'll cut them some slack.
Yeah.
You get a pass.
Yeah. But so that was, like, as you could see from those earlier lists, like, they were always, there were always expansions for PC games, like 81, come on. But they were either, well, they were either free or something else entirely, I guess. But Warcraft 2 was the first one that went big, that was a separate physical thing that you had to go buy, that only worked with the base game, like if you had the base game. And
Right.
a thing I learned from reading through this thread was that it gets really murky as for what you mean by these terms. That's why, like, each of the things, like expansion, free DLC, which means actual downloadable, so it had to have internet, and then paid DLC, and each one is separated into new campaign and new content for the base game, because it's really hard to determine the first of anything until you get really, really, really specific.
Right. That's why we took a minute at the beginning of the episode to be like, this is kind of what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Just in general, yeah. And then you have all these subdivisions.
And then backing away, going over to consoles real quick, Sonic & Knuckles was such a
Yes.
weird case, because for those of you that don't know, Sonic & Knuckles on the Genesis was a cartridge that you put in the Genesis, but it also was a cartridge slot in and of itself. So you could put in Sonic & Knuckles and play Sonic & Knuckles. Just like that.
Yeah.
But you could also attach Sonic 3 to the top of it and play essentially an expansion that added Knuckles into Sonic 3.
Or
Yeah.
Sonic 2.
Or Sonic
It's-
2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 of the original Sonic. I don't remember.
If you plug in the original Sonic, you get the No Way, but you can enter a code to play the that 3D bonus game.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Other games, if you plug in and you just get the static No Way screen. But for Sonic 1, you get the animated No Way screen, and there's a way to play the bonus game.
That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah, if you hook Sonic 2 into it, you can play through Sonic 2 as Knuckles. If you hook in Sonic 3, you can play Sonic 3 as Knuckles. Or basically, if you play through it as Sonic, then Sonic and Knuckles is basically like more campaign added on to the Sonic 3 campaign.
Okay.
I mostly used it for just playing Knuckles in 2. Because you have a new character that can kind of sort of fly.
It's true.
That, as a kid back then, that's really all you wanted.
And that's why, to build the Tower of Power, you have a Genesis with a Sega CD attached, just because. And you put a 32X into that, and you put a Game Genie into that, and you put Sonic and Knuckles into that, and you put Sonic 3 into that.
Holy crap, dude! You're talking about like the freaking Tower of Babel or something at this point. You're just asking for that to fall over.
The
Yeah,
Tower of Power.
it was it, or the Tower of like silly. Like I've seen it in pictures of people that have stacked all of these things into each other, and it I'm actually amazed that the Genesis has enough power to run it. But I guess the 32X and the Sega CD both had separate power supplies. So,
Oh, 32X had a separate power supply.
I think so.
Gosh.
Yes, Dirk.
There was one. I want to say it's an expansion, a continuation. I don't know what the best way to say it was. The original Super Mario Brothers. Because you had that one, the one that was released in the U.S., but the game that was released in Japan had more stuff in it.
Well, see, that's a sequel.
Well,
I mean, it looks, it has the same, like nowadays we'd say, oh, this is basically just a level pack. But at the time, it was a separate game that didn't need the original Super Mario Brothers to play.
Yeah, because the thing that I'm aware of is that there was the Lost Levels that came later.
Well, the Lost Levels is just the Japanese Mario 2.
Yeah, it was
We just called
Mario
it that
2, instead of the reskin of Doki Doki Panic.
Yeah.
Doki Doki Panic, yes.
So, it was because it was like, that was their expansion. Okay.
I remember being at Toys R Us, which was back where we bought the video games back in the day, and my dad trying to talk me into buying Mario 3 because it was the newest thing. I was like, no, I can't buy that. I haven't played Mario 2 yet, so I bought Mario 2. And because, I was a kid, and I was like, I haven't read this book before. I haven't read book 2 in the series. I need to read book 2. That's how numbers work, Dad.
Right?
And so I bought Mario 2, and I'm like, what am I doing? What is this fever dream? Spoiler alert, it actually was a fever dream.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dirk brings up an interesting point with the Japanese Mario 2, which we now call in the US the Lost Levels, is that nowadays if they released a sequel like that, we would complain and say it's basically just a level pack for the first game.
And that was the thing that I was thinking was like that. It technically today would have been this is the expansion. It's not a sequel. It would, because it's the exact same game that the old one was, same skin, same everything. It just had more levels and they were harder.
Exactly. Let's see. Going into other game expansions on consoles, GTA Grand Theft Auto London 1969 was an expansion for the first I think it was Grand Theft Auto 1. It might have been 2 on the PS1. That was a traditional expansion. You had to have the first game. And the way it works is you turn on, according to the article I read, you would turn on the game with the London disc in, and it would tell you to take it out and put in the base game disc, which you would do, and then it would load some stuff, and then it would tell you to put the London disc back in, and then you could play GTA London 1969, and I think that's brilliant. But most of the time for PC games that came out on consoles that had expansions, they were just released as standalone expansions. Sort of like Dirk talking about the war games releasing new pieces. Total Annihilation. Let me try that again. Total Annihilation, which was a real-time strategy game on PC 1,000 years ago, back in 1997 was apparently releasing new units like on a monthly basis for some period of time. Which, wow, okay. how do you balance that? I guess you don't have to, because next month there's going to be another one that's going to screw the balance up again. So screw it. But
Well, and the thing was too, consoles was it wasn't the cartridge consoles when you actually started to get hard drives that could store stuff. That you started to get the expansion that came on a separate disc that you would, like was said earlier, but you would actually just download the disc on. So my recollection were things like Fallout 3.
okay, hang on,
Where
we're not there yet.
not there.
Hold that thought. We're almost there. Actually, there's only one more thing I wanted to mention before we get there, and that was Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike was a weird thing because Counter-Strike was a fan-made expansion, quote unquote, for Half-Life, and the two designers of that ended up getting jobs at Valve, and Counter-Strike became an officially released thing. And I know that there were two versions of this because back in the day in the dorms, Corey and his buddies would play Counter-Strike. And I was like, dude, let me get in on this. So I downloaded Counter-Strike, and all of the weapons in my game were named differently than in their games. Because their game was the fan expansion, and I was playing the official expansion. So they were using the real gun names, where I was using whatever they could get away with to not use copyright.
Yeah.
He was like, buy the such and such, and I'm like, I don't have a such and such. And Corey's like, hang on a minute, and he like took his headset off and rolled over to my computer and was like, what the hell is this? Oh, you've got the Valve expansion. I'm like, I don't know what that means. He's like, your guns are all different. I was like, oh. He's like, buy that one. I'm like, oh, okay. And then he went back to his computer. But yeah, they worked together, which I found hilarious. This was before Steam. Like, Steam didn't happen until I think 2003. So we were just typing in IP addresses to get into a group game. It was a very weird time back then.
May I make one comment? I swear I'm going to try to keep this brief.
Yeah, go for it.
But this is not super relevant to what we're talking about, but you just reminded me of it. We truly do live in an age where video games and video gamers are probably more accepted than they've ever been. How do I know this? Because I was in court today, and I heard a judge, right before she was going to go take the bench, talking to another attorney about blah, 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 but I got it off a sale on Steam. She was talking about something called Rust, which I'm not familiar with.
Ooh.
So...
That is this judge a hard ass?
She can be when necessary, but she's actually really she's quite fair.
Oh, okay, good. Because Rust is one of those crafting survival games where you're only playing with other people in public, and you have to have a special kind of mindset to play those games that I don't have.
Okay. But I didn't mean to distract too much. I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot I had this cool experience today. So
yeah,
anyway.
the Steam spring sale ended earlier today, so yeah.
This judge knows more about Steam than I do. That is not surprising because I don't do anything on console or on PC.
See, he doesn't even know what it's called.
Exactly. But sorry, continue.
Yeah. So then, yeah, my opinion is that the golden age of console DLCs was the 360 and PS3 era. What was Oblivion on? Was Oblivion on the 360? It was. So yeah, that's when we started getting hard drives. That Dirk mentioned, and yeah, so go for it, Dirk.
Well, they used to get hard drive. You could actually get hard drives that could store significant data. So you would still need the disc to play the base game, but you would get the expansion pack as a disc, and what it would do is it would just download the expansion onto the hard drive, and that way you didn't have to keep, like was mentioned earlier about swapping a disc in and out and everything. It would just download the content of the expansion disc. So for things like Oblivion, there was the Knights of it was the Knights of the or the nine. It was the night one
Damn
where
it!
you
Oblivion expansions. The Shivering Isles was the big one. What was Knights of the Nine? There
Knights
we
of the
go.
Nine was the expansion I knew of, but yeah, I bought that expansion, and it offered an additional campaign, armor, all that fun stuff, and so I played that one very much. So I had beaten the game, gone into that one. I tried the Shimmering Isles one, and that was just, or the Shivering Isles, and that one was just too off the wall for me. Like I just could not beat it.
Not
Um,
not a Sheogorath type of guy, huh?
No. So there was that one. That's the other significant I remember expansion wise was Fallout 3, because it also had a whole bunch of expansions. And then later on, all the expansions were put together to create the Game of the Year edition, where the disc was big enough that it could hold all of them on it. And I think it was because they either reformatted it or they just shoved it all onto 2 discs instead of 1, and then it would download the necessary files for it to play the second disc, and then you would just play off the first disc. But that, I remember that one as well, and that had a whole bunch. And that was the first time with 3 that I remember actually downloading the expansions to those.
Yeah. I had all of the expansions for Fallout 3 eventually, and I didn't buy the physical version of none of those because by that point, Xbox Live was a thing and was up and running and had, well, it was up and running, and so developers took advantage of that and were like, hey, you can buy this disc, or you could just keep your ass on the couch and click some buttons and give us money, and then we'll just send it to you. And I was like, nice.
Because I think they stopped Operation Anchorage, The Pit, and Broken Steel. I think were physical discs. I know Mothership Zeta was not. That one
Right.
you had to download. And I don't know about Point Lookout.
I don't remember either.
Because my brother was playing them way before I was, and he actually had the physical expansion discs for the first 3 for sure. So that's how I know that was the point where they were still doing. You still ordered expansion discs, and I remember playing MechWarrior 3, and I know MechWarrior 2 also had expansion discs as well, because the base game for MechWarrior 2 was just Clan Wolf and Clan Jade Falcon. This first and the expansion to it threw in the Ghost Bears, Clan Ghost Bear, as a third faction that you could fight as. And then they added additional expansion that was, I think, like a mercenaries or something, where you could fight as the Inner Sphere against the clans. So I know there were 2 expansions with that one, and 3 had 2 expansions and a whole bunch of additional ones that just said, here's 6 mechs we're just throwing in there.
Yep.
Those were physical discs that I had. So it wasn't just here's cosmetic updates. It was here. This disc has this many mechs on it. Buy this, and you get to have these mechs in the campaign, any campaign that you want. Whichever version you want. The mechs are there.
And I think this is a good time to talk about even more the different types of DLCs. So you've got the worst kind, like Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion had horse armor, which has become infamous. It was infamous immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember how much horse armor cost, but it was literally a cosmetic for your horse that cost multiple dollars. I think it was like $3 or $4 maybe, but it wasn't actually armor. It didn't keep your horse a lot. It was literally just a skin. And this is in the early days before we had microtransactions. Nowadays, that would be a microtransaction.
Yeah.
But they released it as DLC because that's what there was. And they were testing the waters. And they realized, don't do that again. Because it became a meme before we called it a meme. Like, it predates the usage of the word meme for that reason. Dementor says it thinks it was $3.99. Like, in my brain, it was like 1,500 Microsoft points, but I don't know if that's right. I don't remember what the transaction rate for that was. So that's probably wrong. But so you've got the ones that are basically worthless, like horse armor. Then you've got stuff like Dirk was talking about with what was it, the one with the mechs? My brain just shut down.
Mech Warrior 3.
Mech Warrior.
There we go, Mech Warrior 3. Where it's giving you new toys to play with throughout the game. So like new mechs, new weapons, new characters, but that's it. Which
it doesn't add story. It's just here's more things to play with.
Yeah.
Right.
So those are fun. Like, then you've got the ones that most of the Fallout 3 stuff that Dirk just rattled off are new areas in the game. So they're new campaigns. Like for the Pit DLC, you go to a place on the map in the base game, and that takes you to the Pit, which is a whole separate area, and there's a whole story and new items and characters and weapons and stuff in there. And when you're done with that and you can go back to the base game, you can bring with you all of that new stuff and play in the base game.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be like the new campaigns for board games that we new campaigns. But then there's also stuff like the Broken Steel DLC for Fallout 3 that adds new stuff to the base game. Like the ending for Fallout 3, spoilers, sucks. Like the base ending is really just dumb. Somebody has to go in there to all of the radiation and die, but not the giant super mutant here who's immune to radiation. No. He you can't send him in. You've got to go in. And so you sacrifice yourself to win the video game. And much like later games that had a dumb ending, that bothered people. So in the Broken Steel DLC, they fixed that. They changed that. And then they added like a whole actual big ending to the game that was much more bombastic and whatnot. So that's cool. So there's that kind of thing that adds to what's already there. And then I tried to think up a term for this, but I couldn't. There's Red Dead Redemption's Undead Nightmare, which I guess technically is a new campaign, but it's the world that you know already, but completely reimagined with zombies. Like all of the characters and locations are there, but it's a different game set in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a non-canonical game or version of the game.
I mean, sure, but if you start using words like canonical, it has nothing. I'm not talking about the story. I'm talking about the mechanics. Like it's technically a new campaign, but it takes place in the same place. Unlike
Everything, all the world is the same, like the setting and the geography is the word I'm looking for.
yeah,
And everyone you know is there, but they're all zombies.
or they're gonna get killed, or their entire circumstances changed because now there are zombies in the world. It's brilliant. By the way, if you never got to play Red Dead Redemption's Undead Nightmare DLC, Red Dead Redemption was Rockstar's best game on that generation. Fight me. And the Undead Nightmare DLC is easily one of the best DLCs ever because of the familiarity, and yet everything is wrong. And it had like whole new mechanics, like the defending towns from waves of zombies and whatnot. It was amazing. I'm sad that I only ever played it once. Hey Rockstar, could you re-release Red Dead Redemption and Undead Nightmare on the Steam? Just drop it. You don't have to do anything to it. I'm looking up like I'm talking to God. Like Rockstar, are you listening? Is this thing on? Anyway,
Are you there, Rockstar?
are you there, Rockstar? It's me, Chewy.
Is that the name of the episode? It doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about, but it's too good.
Excuse me. Talking to the Rockstar God made me almost die. And then there's stuff like Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight had 3 DLCs, but they were completely new games. Like they were new campaigns. Like the Plague Knight campaign took place on the same levels as the Shovel Knight campaign, but you were playing as Plague Knight. But then the Spectre Knight campaign, it had its own story too, by the way. It's not like you were just playing Shovel Knight as Plague Knight. Like, it was a new story, but the levels were all the same. But then the Spectre Knight campaign was a new story and a new character and new levels. And then the King Knight campaign was a new story, a new character to play as, completely new levels, like they were all much shorter and punchier, and a collectible card game side thing as part of the campaign as well. And those were all I don't know if those were all free. They're all free now. If you just buy the game, you get them all. Because now it's called Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, and it's got those 4 campaigns and the other Shovel Knight, like the one-on-one or the fighting game. I haven't played it yet, so I can't remember what the hell it's called or what it does. But yeah. So, tell you what, let's not end on the bad stuff. Let's jump into the bad stuff, and then we'll come back and talk about our favorites. So after DLC hit, and like I said, I don't know if I said this or not. I think we had a golden age of DLCs that happened in the 360 and PS3 era, where DLCs for these beloved games were art. Like they were more art than business, let's put it that way. Like, sure, they were business, they were selling you stuff that they didn't have to sell you, but they put effort and work into all of these things that, well, not all of them, but the ones that people remember, like the Mass Effect DLCs, by and large, people love. There were some downsides, though. We'll get into that, but let's get into that now. The problem with DLCs, some of the problems with DLCs are game developers want to sell you stuff that they could give you. I remember, I think it was Street Fighter 4 had on-disc DLC, which means it was planned ahead of time before the game's release that the stuff was going to be on the disc, but you couldn't access it until you paid for DLC.
Mm-hmm.
And that pisses people off.
Yeah.
Because
And
that sounds
I'm
like
gonna
you're
say
trying to fleece
rightfully
your
so.
gamers. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds like you're trying to fleece your gamers and squeeze money out of them that you've already put that on the disc, but you have to pay to unlock it.
And Squee needs his money. Sorry.
And then there's the problem of like releasing
Day one DLC stuff.
thank you. That's my brain shut down again. Yeah, day one DLC. So stuff that like or pre-order DLC. You know, which is still a thing to this day. Hey, if you pre-order, then you'll get all this other stuff that you won't get otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Which most of it is nothing. It's, you know, cosmetics or extra money or something, but it's there to if I'm going to go ahead and pre-order the game, I might as well pre-order it from this place. So I'm guilty of this. I pre-ordered one of the Assassin's Creed. I think it was Assassin's Creed 2 cuz it came with stuff. And I was like, "Sure, I got that from GameStop." And then they gave me a pre-order. They gave me a disc that didn't have the pre-order code in it. So I had to go back the next day. You bastards. And then when I did get it and I put in the code, it was just nothing. I was like, "Oh, is this all? Glad I did that." And then you get the game developers that want to drip feed you crappy DLC. Like Fallout 3 had a lot of DLCs. Like we just rattled them off. They were like what, 6 or 7? And that's awesome. But those were all like separate things that felt like they had work put into them, but not like, oh, here's, you know, a level and a skin and a weapon. And then a few months later, it's, oh, here's a level and a skin and a weapon. And it was just a way to keep the game in the conversation for longer so they could rack up more sales.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also kind of crappy. Luckily, gamers, for the most part, can see through these things. But gamers are also really bad, sort of like Magic players, at voting with their wallet. So,
And it's largely a matter of priority too. You know, like, yeah, I don't like this, but I like it enough, so
yeah. And then we got microtransactions, which were not DLCs in the way that we used to mean it. You know, full expansions and extra content. It was like horse armor, or you know, skins for your characters or skins for your guns, and that led into loot boxes. And, you know, things that are actively gambling, but for some reason aren't seen that way by people, which I don't understand. And I'm speaking as someone who fell into that hard with freaking Overwatch.
Overwatch did it. Heroes of the Storm. You know.
Yeah, Blizzard is bad about it now. They used to be the gold standard for game expansions. Now they're the gold standard for how to fleece your players.
And then EA did that also with Star Wars Battlefield 2.
Oh,
yeah.
That blew up in their face, right? And I think that actually
it did.
People did vote with their wallets there.
Yeah. Well, that was like an egregious example because the loot boxes in that had stuff in them. They were essentially pay to win. Like, it cut off like 80 hours of playing the game to get enough stuff to unlock Darth Vader. My numbers might be off, but it's a lot of hours.
It was a lot.
To grind, to play the game for, you know, X number of hours a day, it would take you like months to be able to unlock Darth Vader. But if you just bought enough loot boxes, maybe you could unlock him that way. And that wasn't a skin. Like, that was a character that was objectively better than other characters in the game.
Yeah.
So, like, that blew up, and they drastically reduced the amount of playing it took in-game to unlock these other characters outside of loot boxes. Because
and that also includes
that was awful.
Diablo Immortal, where the DLC for that one allows you to buy character levels or buy something that the more money you sink into it, the faster you get through the game.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can buy stuff, either one-time packs or like weekly or even some small daily stuff for experience boosts and in-game currency and more legendary gems and this and that and this and that and this and that.
Yeah, and
So yes, helps you to advance way faster than if you're just doing free play.
yeah, it's a video game where the money options, and this is also a huge thing with mobile games. It's a video game that is meant to be played, but all of the stuff you can pay for is to circumvent playing the game.
Which
Because
is
Well-
such an interesting concept, isn't it? Because
Or
it's
to
like,
skip straight to the end high level end game content.
yeah, but that's such a fascinating idea, isn't it? Because they're like, we've spent, hours and hours of developer time and money to give you this game, and you can get started. But if you give us more money, you have to play through less of it. And yes, I realize it's to play through less of it to get the stuff you really want, but it's just an interesting concept to be like, here's this game we made, and we spent a lot of time on it. How little time do you want to spend playing our game? If you want to spend less time, give us this money.
but also that means that they made the grind
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
like an awful grind to encourage people to pay extra to skip it. And
Yeah.
that's awful.
I mean, this is par for the course on mobile games, which I know we're not getting into mobile games specifically, or we haven't so far, but so many mobile games are like, all right, get started playing this. Oh, by the way, if so many, it's like either it takes a lot of effort and time to unlock characters, or you get those characters, but then it takes forever to grind for gear or level up materials or whatever. And you're talking about, and if you play like I do, where you are free to play, if you are patient, you can get there. But it's really hard sometimes when you're like, okay, if I do this for like 2 months, I'll be able to totally get this character up. Or there's a button here that's like 2 months or 2 seconds. It just and like $39.99 or whatever. The costs for some of these microtransactions are enormous. It
Mega
there were
transactions.
yeah, well, so there was a Kingdom Hearts game, Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and in celebration of Kingdom Hearts 3 coming out, like a little while before its release, they were like, "Hey, you can buy this special medal that you can equip to your character, and to level it up all the way, you need to buy 6 of them." So for each one was like $15 or $20 or whatever, and a lot of people did the math, and they were like, "You expect me to pay more money for 6 copies of this one item in this one game than I will spend on Kingdom Hearts 3 itself." And yet, how many people probably did it? A lot.
I mean,
Mobile
yeah.
games are big money business, just crazy.
Yeah, and
But
it's because
that's-
the most of them prey on that notion, like the parts of your brain that get addicted.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, between that and the heavy lean into FOMO when it comes to like limited time banners or whatever.
yup.
But yeah, gambling plus FOMO plus like just dopamine equals cha-ching.
Exactly. And that's why I've sworn off all mobile games just on principle.
And I only play ones that I can play for free. So, which some might say takes a lot of discipline. I literally just don't let myself do it. It just is not a factor. Period.
Yeah.
Straight up. So.
And
But
yeah,
you wanted to end on a positive.
when mobile games started coming out and getting big and leaning into FOMO, console game developers and PC game developers did too. Now we have live services and season or game passes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all already live services. I think are slowly getting turned against because so many of them have just been shut down recently. Like Square Enix has shut down 6 or 7 live service games just in the last few months, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And as a big middle finger to anybody who put time and effort and money, because live service games, unlike Magic, where if I stop buying Magic cards, I can still play Magic. Live service games, when they shut the servers down, there's no game anymore.
Yeah, it's just done.
So anything, time and effort and energy and fun and money you've put into it are gone now, except for the experiences you had, which most of these live service games aren't even fun. I stopped having fun playing Hearthstone and Overwatch a long time before I quit playing them.
But you were playing them because
that's what I did.
Fallacy, or just it was your routine or whatever.
Yeah, it was what I did. When I'm not doing something else, I'm playing Hearthstone on my phone.
Yeah.
And on Tuesdays, the crew gets together and we play Overwatch. And that's just what we did.
Because it's just what you did, yeah.
And that's another thing, is they build a routine. That's why so many games have daily quests and daily objectives and daily login bonuses, is to build the routine until you don't notice anymore.
Yeah. And I do that with my mobile games, but the thing is, I only play the ones that I actually genuinely still enjoy. I stopped playing Hearthstone over a year ago, just because I wasn't enjoying it anymore. But that's another part of the reason why I don't spend money on these games, because I have no possessory interest in them. When I kind of look back and I think, wow, for any game that I've played that's gone online, if I could have put $100, $200, I'm sure more into it, and have nothing. You say still the experience. That's great, I guess. But to me, is that experience worth that money? I don't think so. But I still have all my Magic cards. I'm looking at them right now. All these piles and piles of cards.
And like season passes are another thing where I know in Arena the way it works is if you play during this, season or month or whatever, then you'll get this stuff. But if you give us money for the season pass, then you'll get more stuff as you play, and stuff is I don't know, gems and
stuff
gold.
Is faster to get, and there's some stuff you can only get that way. I think I mentioned on a previous episode
pets
that I had done the math for one season, and just being free to play for that season, it would be impossible to actually unlock some stuff like that should have been doable. You're locked out. I've played somewhat irregularly in the months to come, so I don't know if that's still the case. I don't know why they would change it, but
BeatStars, when they do their seasons each month, they usually also release like 9 new songs to go with the season. But if you're on the free track, it's only possible to get to it. The only way to get all 9 is to be on the paid season track.
Marvel Snap has been pretty good. I don't feel like it's been too predatory. Of course, I was like day 1 or day 1 or day 2, and I don't know how easy it would be to start now. Not that it would be impossible, because you'd be playing against people that also just started, but it's definitely a game that rewards constant progression. And they have a pass, and that will unlock cards that later, if you don't buy it, you can still get, but you have kind of like a random chance of getting them, and you have to save up tokens, and tokens are not easy to get. So it's still relatively free-to-play friendly, but there's definitely the potential there for some predatory stuff.
Yeah. So, like, I'm not saying that all modern DLC is bad, because it's not. Like, Power Wash Simulator just released 2 expansions, free expansions, essentially, that are based on other, because it's published by Square Enix. They're based on other Square Enix properties. So there's Tomb Raider properties and things to power wash, and then there's Final Fantasy VII stuff in Midgar to power wash, and that's cool. Those are free. Hollow Knight had multiple DLCs that added all kinds of stuff into the game. I'm pretty sure those were free. I'm pretty sure. I don't think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure those were all free. Dead Cells, just like a week or so ago, released a DLC that is paid, so you have to buy it. But it's Castlevania.
Saw advertisements for this, and I was like, "That's cool." I don't know what a Dead Cells is, but they made it look really sweet.
Yeah. So Dead Cells is a roguelike Metroidvania. I've played a lot of it. It's good. And they release several DLCs, and each DLC adds new weapons and new locations and like new places to go in the Metroidvania thing. And yeah, they're all, you know, relatively inexpensive. And thanks to Scuzzo, I have the Castlevania DLC too, because he just randomly sent it to me. He's like, "Here, you need this." I was like, "I was gonna get it." He's like, "Well, now you got it." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And it again adds new weapons that are based on, you know, they come from Castlevania games, and new enemies that come from Castlevania games, and locations that come from Castlevania games. And I'm pretty sure the final boss is Dracula, because of course it is.
Any new soundtracks that are based off of Castlevania games?
There's gotta be, right? Like, otherwise,
I
why
would
bother
think
calling
so.
it Castlevania? There's 2 people in the chat who have played it, so I'm sure they will weigh in a second when the delay catches up. But other stuff like Cities Skylines is a city building game. Oh, okay. Scuzzo said, "Oh yeah."
Good.
The City Skylines is a city building game that has just ridiculous amounts of DLC, but all of it. Okay, well, some of them are just like cosmetic or add different types of radio stations that'll play while you're playing. But for people like me who don't care about that, the bigger actual expansions are new things. Like, for instance, the airports DLC. Instead of having an airport that you plop down, airports are modular with different pieces, and you can actually design an entire airport like a small city. You know, you have to build out the runways and the taxiways for the airplanes and make sure you have the different parts, and you can arrange that however you like in a given area to build your own airport rather than just, here's an airport, like from old SimCity, you know.
Mhm.
And all of the DLCs for City Skylines do stuff like that. So that's cool. Final Fantasy VII Remake had the integrated DLC that gave you Yuffie and 2 new chapters of a completely new story where you're just playing as Yuffie. You're not. It doesn't add Yuffie to the regular game. It's. Excuse me. It's a separate campaign. So, and all of these are, you know, relatively modern. But those are just the good examples. There are plenty of things that are obviously just meant to separate you from your money.
Yeah.
Although those sorts of DLC seem to have taken a backseat for the more blatant separate you from your money things like the FOMO and the live service and the season passes and whatnot.
Because they found that they can just say that stuff out loud. And
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But since we didn't want to end on a negative note, let's talk about our some of our favorite DLCs and why. Like, Mike, I know you wanted to mention Diablo 2.
Yeah, because well, I guess it wasn't a DLC; it was an add-on that was sold physically and also in a bundle. But the Lord of Destruction expansion for Diablo 2 added just so added a lot to the game, like 2 whole new classes, a bunch of quality of life improvements, and like the inventory and some other things. Um, New kinds of items, like class specific items, a whole new act with new areas and a new boss. Just all kinds of great stuff. It was really, really fun.
I only ever played Diablo 2 with that bundle, so I only ever played it with those quality of life improvements. And from what I have heard about how it played before, it was not a bad game. You can't convince me that Diablo 2 was ever a bad game, but I don't know that I would recognize it without some of those quality of life improvements. Like
Hmm.
the expanded inventory, right? Like
Yeah.
I already played Diablo 2. Like when I would play it, I would be hoarding everything, and getting rid of anything was already a chore. I couldn't imagine doing that with less room. Like I would fill up my Herodrix cube with just stuff just to, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Can't drop these gems. I might need them someday. But yeah, I only ever played it that way. So yeah.
That's pretty cool.
For an add-on, it's kind of funny. One of the first things that I even thought of when we were talking about doing this segment to begin with a couple weeks ago was, remember how you used to have to buy the Rumble pack with the N64, like for Star Fox or something, because it was technology that they didn't include, or either didn't exist or they didn't include with the system at launch. And later, first of all, every controller comes with a rumble function now. I was playing something a while ago, I think Final Fantasy VII or something, and I set the controller down on a table just during a cutscene, and some explosion or something happened, and the dang thing nearly rattled itself off of the table, and Sam started to laugh so hard. But just thinking about, how some of that stuff starts as add-ons and then later becomes just an integrated part of the technology is kind of interesting to me as well.
Although
And
that's
that's
getting
at
into
least,
peripherals, which is a whole other thing.
you don't want to talk about the robot. We'll talk about the robot some other time. I
Yeah,
never
yeah.
owned a
That's
robot,
where
but
I, because you brought up first like the expansion pack for the N64. I was
mhm,
gonna take it in like a peripherals direction, and then Mike brought up software game expansions, and I was like, oh, that's way
yeah,
better.
yeah. So,
But yeah, we'll do
but
a peripherals episode at some point because, dear God,
will you consider it an add-on to this episode, or will people have to pay for it with microtransactions to listen to it? We'll
all
just
right,
release it in 5-minute bursts.
enough of the puns. Let's get back to the content.
Sorry, sorry.
Um, the one that I enjoyed a lot, and there's plenty of them that I could go into, but the one that I do not see how this game could not have been is just unfinished without the expansion. Was Star Wars Tie Fighter.
Hmm.
Star Wars Tie Fighter is a flight simulator, except it's space combat in on the Empire side. The original game ended with you saving the Emperor, but
Yay!
there was a ton of, like, it left the story hanging. Yes, you saved the Emperor, but the admiral involved with this coup attempt got away, and it just left the story hanging. So they ended up releasing an expansion pack that wrapped the story up and explains why one of the most notable characters got his position. That character was Grand Admiral Thrawn, because Thrawn gets woven into the story. You serve under him as when he's a vice admiral, and you get to kind of meet and see how he is. And there's a very in-depth story that goes with the games and everything. Um, but the expansion pack essentially shows how he becomes the Grand Admiral, and
Hmm.
how and you get to see his tactical genius in the game by essentially duping this Grand Admiral into doing what he wanted him to do by baiting him into activities, and explains why certain ships that you have in the missions aren't there later on because of all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So it's the reason why the TIE Defender that you see in the game is not in the Battle of Endor or anywhere else, because they were wiped out during this campaign. So it plays a huge amount into the lore and the universe. And again, the game ends with this massive cliffhanger unless you get the expansion for it, and then it is just a beautiful piece of art in how it wraps everything up.
You can tell that Dirk is a lore junkie because everything he's gone into detail on is story based. Have you noticed this?
Yeah, not so much about the mechanics of the game.
There are some expansions that I get, they're purely for cosmetics and everything. Like Civilization 6 is coming out with they've been releasing a whole bunch of characters because they're wrapping the game up, and so they're releasing content, which it's free content as long as you bought like the season pass. The season pass has everything that they've released and still gets you all the new characters, all the new leaders. So as they're wrapping things up, they're like, here, let's throw in some more characters that are these countries that we've already established, but they have new abilities. So that way you guys have more stuff you can do while we're making the next game, sort of thing. So there's been tons of really cool expansions. I enjoyed the what is the name of it? It is the Rise and Fall expansion, the DLC to it, which allowed for climate change. That if you let CO2 levels get high, then it starts melting the ice caps and it starts flooding the land. And it creates weather patterns that just wreak havoc across the countries, the nations. And so it's a very fun DLC that adds more civs, more mechanics, more everything into it. So I enjoyed that stuff as well.
And see, like, I play video games for an escape from the horrors of the modern world that we live in, and Dirk is like, yes, add more global warming, yay! I'm just like,
There's there's a lot of history of games that had a real ending locked behind DLC. I think one of the most infamous is Ashura's Wrath, which was a PS3 and 360 game, where the real ending wasn't there. You had to buy DLC to get the real ending. Oh, and somehow Chifuji just brought that up in the chat. Huh. Damn, that's eerie. And what else? Oh, we mentioned Broken Steel for Fallout 3, which fixes the stupid ending. And then Mass Effect 3 is the big one, where the public outcry about the ending was so bad that... Now, I never played the Mass Effect games, so this is all very fuzzy to me. I didn't experience it firsthand, but I think when I asked Bill, he thought this too. They changed it with a patch. Mm-hmm. And then later there was the extended cut, or I think that's what it's called, DLC, that added something to the ending. I don't remember. But, like, that was a whole to-do that actually was a source of some of the problems with the gaming community these days, where who made Mass Effect? BioWare cracked under the pressure from the angry fans on the internet and changed something, and that was probably a mistake.
Expectation that if you do that you can get... Do you think it created an expectation that if you do that the company will follow suit?
Yeah. And that's
That-
part of the reason why so many of the capital G gamers TM are such dicks these days. And are such entitled jerks and regularly do things like, I don't know, let's throw out the G word Gamergate and things like that. I'm not going to say it's because of the Mass Effect 3 thing, but that was the gamers, capital G gamers TM, realizing they could do things if they just harassed people. And that's not good. Don't harass game developers. For God's sake, what's wrong with you people? Not you people. People who do that wouldn't listen to this show. What else was in my notes? Fallout 3, Mass Effect. Oh, dude, I forgot about one. Okay, one of the craziest expansions, which I think was later released as a separate thing, but was Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. So Far Cry 3 took place on like a jungle island, right? Just say
Okay.
yes. Okay.
Yes.
Far
Yeah,
Cry
yeah.
3 Blood Dragon took place in like an 80s neon crazy place with big like biomechanical dinosaurs. And like it was
They're the
80s
same thing.
to the max. Like it was
Yeah.
they got Michael Biehn to be the voice of, if not the main character, then the person the main character talks to. I can't remember because it's been a long time. You know, Michael Biehn from such movies as The Terminator and Aliens. 80s action hero personified. Yep. And it was the engine of Far Cry 3, but in a completely different looking environment. It still had basically the same mechanics, but it got a complete visual overhaul and a new story and all of that. And it was it was ridiculous. It was fun, but it was ridiculous. Oh, and The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt had a few expansions, but the Blood and Wine expansion is widely regarded as one of the best DLCs ever. Like in all of the articles that I read, it got a mention positively in all of them. Because it was DLC done right. Like The Witcher 3 is already a massive game. And they just added more. Lots more. And it was all good. And yeah, it reminded me of, you know, old Bethesda back when they made DLC properly. You know, like Skyrim and Fallout 3. And I think New Vegas had expansions too, didn't it? I never played New Vegas, which I'm ashamed to admit.
Yes, it did.
Okay, thank you.
Multiple.
Nice. Bill complained that, like, in the later Mass Effect games, in order to get playable characters, and I think he means playable characters that were in the first game, because, you know, Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, if you can start with one and just play through with the same character and the same, like, shipmates, like, you could import your save from the previous game and truly make it 3 games that were yours, you know, your experiences. But he mentioned that there were characters, playable characters and whatnot, that were locked behind DLC, and I think he said it was playable characters that were from earlier in the trilogy, which is really crappy. But then you got the Citadel DLC, which was just like a huge fan service party before the final mission in the game. that everyone loves. Because it's DLC done right, you know. So how about you guys? What else you got?
I've been trying to think, and I don't know, maybe just because I, it's been a while since, as much as I enjoy video games, I don't know the last time I've actually purchased any DLC. So, I mean, I'm agreeing with everything I've heard, but
Yeah. Like I've gotten other things more recently, like well, I guess recently is in air quotes for some of them. Like the expansions for Diablo 3, that was several years ago. But one of the top things that comes to my mind that I enjoyed it, but in retrospect it felt like kind of a ripoff, was the Guitar Hero Rocks the 80s game, which was really an expansion. The song list wasn't all that long, but it was like priced like a standalone game, so that was kind of a feel bad. But I really liked the stuff that came on it. That was another one where it's a physical expansion
Now,
instead of downloadable, because this wasn't one of the online versions of Guitar Hero. This was like around the time of I can't remember if it was in between 2 and 3 or after 3. I just don't recall right now.
yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, brings up music games, where before we had downloadable content, you had to buy a separate game. Like Bill brought up the Dance Dance Revolution games, where the games are basically all the same, just with different music. And yeah, because he brought up how did people react to like Rock Band, and I was like, okay, I bought so much Rock Band DLC.
Yes.
Like, yeah, Mike was there. I bought so much Rock Band DLC because individual songs for like $2. So I'd be like Scott would be like, dude, did you see what came out this week? Did you get this song? And I'm like, I mean, no. He's like, okay, buy it for me. I was like, all right, bring me a milkshake. And when he would come over to play Rock Band, he would swing by Cookout and grab me a milkshake, and that way he bought it.
I think there were a few times where I saw a song and was like, ooh, and I gave you a couple bucks right then and there. So,
yeah, that Clutch song I specifically remember.
Yeah.
Some number of unstoppable watts.
50,000 and stuff.
Oh, it was 50.
And I think also Laid to Rest. I might have given you a couple bucks to buy Laid to Rest.
Oh, I think maybe.
I thought of one.
Oh, what'd you get?
Giving more credit here to Blizzard, StarCraft, Brood. Was it Brood Wars? That was the expansion.
It was.
Yes, because ask anybody that played with me in college, and yeah, we had a whole StarCraft League thing going on. When I found out I could make Dark Templars and Dark Archons, it was just, there was no going back for me. Because I'm like, I could make these little invisible assassins. It doesn't matter, they can't hit anything in the air. They're invisible assassins. And then, when you merge two of them together, you get a unit that literally mind controls somebody else's unit and just takes it for themselves. Come on. Like, you know how I play Magic. It's like all hexproof stuff, and it's all shared fate. But, I just keep it. So, yes. Yes. You guys do all the hard work, and then I'll stab you in the back and take your stuff. Am I a bad person? Oh, I'll think about that later.
Yeah, Blizzard, again, was the standard bearer for good expansions or add-ons or whatever. The terms were interchangeable. Like, StarCraft had... We talked about Warcraft 2. Warcraft 3 had more. StarCraft had Brood Wars. StarCraft 2 had, 2 other complete... could have been separate games that were just expansions to StarCraft 2?
Yep.
And then we didn't even get into games like World of Warcraft, where expansions are there to keep people subscribed, I guess. So the games don't stagnate. But now they're like Overwatch 2. Like it was said in the chat, it's what did Stark say? It's wild. Isn't it wild how Blizzard went from Warcraft 3 to Overwatch 2? Overwatch 2 is like Overwatch 1 just had loot boxes. Overwatch 2 I think has like a shop where you can buy skins with real money or with currency that you can only buy with real money, and I think it's got a season pass. Like everything I've heard about the monetization in Overwatch 2 makes me want to vomit, which is why I don't play Overwatch 2. And I'm pretty sure you have to buy when the single player only stuff comes out or the PvE stuff comes out. I think you have to buy that separately, which just also made me want to vomit. I could be wrong about that, though. I could be wrong about everything I've said tonight, except for the horse armor being awful and the Undead Nightmare being the best DLC ever. Everything else I could have been wrong about. More stuff that people mentioned, or that Mad Stork MSU Greg mentioned on Twitter. Borderlands 2 had Assault on Dragon Keep, which wasn't that the one that was like no, that was Tiny Tina's something or other, wasn't it? The one that was like D&D based. I never played any of the Borderlands games.
Sure. My brother loved them, but I don't remember what they were called.
He said Assault on Dragon Keep is peak humor for Borderlands while tackling the heavy topic of grief, and there's amazing loot and some fun, unique enemies. Mass Effect 2 had Overlord, which he mentioned that brought in the Hammerhead. I don't know what that is. And the story was different than typical Mass Effect fare. Very dark vibe in the music and visuals. The Citadel, here's another one where the Citadel is cheesy fan service, but it brings all the characters together for one last party before the conclusion of the story. He mentioned Lord of Destruction for Diablo. This is the first time he encountered DLC, and it was amazing. He likes Point Lookout for Fallout 3 too. I don't remember which one was Point Lookout, but he said it was dark but fun. It had the Coney Island type theme at the abandoned amusement park. There was a fun side story about some Chinese spies. And the story shifts from gothic horror to Lovecraftian to more southern gothic horror, which is just great. Oh, that one was Point Lookout. Okay. Turbo, whose name I can never pronounce properly, Oystein, I want to say, said on Facebook his favorite DLCs are The Messenger, because it was free, it was more of the same like humor and goodness, and it had the best boss in the game, in his opinion, the Totem. He mentioned Shovel Knight. Cuphead was more of the same, but it's one of the best games ever, so it was, obviously that counts. And he also mentioned the Splatoon 2 DLC. It had a great 4 to 5 hour long single player campaign that improved a lot of the basic campaign from the base game and mixed up gameplay in new and interesting ways. Huh. I've never played any of the Splatoons either. And Squanto mentioned the Breath of the Wild DLC packs as some of his favorite, but he said that might be a recency bias. I don't know how recent those are. Maybe he's just recently played them. I don't know. But there was a lot in there, including like Master Mode. I didn't realize Master Mode was a DLC, which is, hard mode. I think that covers most of our positive feedback. AJ, not that one, different one, did bring up another downside. He's like, games are pushed out so fast that things that could be in the main game become DLC, not because they plan it that way, but because they didn't have time to implement it properly. Because the publisher was like, get the game out, get the game out, get the game out, get the game out, get the game out. I was like, that's a thing, yeah. So, yeah. Like, I love DLCs done right. My my theory is that the golden age of DLC was the 360 and PS3 era, and then after that, microtransactions and drip feeds and season passes and FOMO and all that became standard practice. But those first few years, and it was earlier than that for PC games, because PCs had online functionality way before consoles did. But the vast majority of people that responded, you'll notice, all had games from that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like mine, the first thing that came to my mind was Undead Nightmare and Skyrim. I had Dragonborn and Dawnguard, which weirdly enough I've never played the stories for those. Which is weird to say. And Fallout 3, where I eventually got through all of the DLCs. And yeah, there was effort put in to make sure it was worth it for us as players, rather than all of the effort being in making sure it was worth it for the company to make all the money. Like, and that's a sad state of affairs. Like, just look at the difference between old Blizzard games and new Blizzard games, and it's blatantly obvious where the gaming industry has gone. And it gives me a sad. So, yeah.
But if there's anything to give us hope, it is some stuff like the Power Wash simulator that you mentioned. So, still a couple
and
good ones
those are
out
free.
there.
And indie games, I mean, a bunch of the games I rattled off earlier are indie games. I mean, Power Wash
Right.
Simulator is published by Square Enix, but it's not made by Square Enix.
Right. So there is still hope. It just may come from smaller developers.
Yeah, AAA games are, like, sadly these days they seem to be mostly made by committee, and they all have to have certain things in it. Like I was complaining in the pre-show about Resident Evil 4 the remake having a crafting system that is completely unnecessary, because it's a modern AAA game and AAA games have crafting in them, so stick it in there. But indie games, as always, are the hope for the future. So, I know that two of our co-hosts here have got to be almost dead.
I am falling asleep, but I am also somewhat medicated legally, by the way. So I'm probably gonna head out.
Is that stuff legal in this state now? Oh, wait, nothing. Never mind.
But I will take the time to do a very quick final thought. Samantha and I were able to see, because we're Amazon Prime members, and because my wife pays attention to things that I don't, we were able to see a preview screening of the movie Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves last weekend, and it was a very enjoyable film. I recommend it. You do not need to play Dungeons and Dragons to enjoy it. If you are familiar with the creatures and some of the setting, then there's a lot of little Easter eggs, and the setting is in the standard D&D Faerun, I think is what it's called, and it mentions several cities like Waterdeep and Neverwinter and other things that I only know a little more tangentially because my campaign is set in a homebrew, but I just from reading and picking up on other things. If you're a massive lore Dirk, uh, then there'll be a lot there for you to enjoy. But do you need to know anything about D&D? I don't think so. It's just if you enjoy fantasy movies, it is one of them, and it's decently acted. The story is fine.
Movie Bob said it was like the swords and sorcery version of Guardians of the Galaxy. How does that sound to you?
I think I enjoyed it. That's almost giving it a bit too much credit. There were parts of the story that I felt were pretty darn predictable, but so it didn't really like blow my mind. Like first time I ever saw Guardians, I was like, "That's amazing!" Like just Groot and just the way they carried everything. This was good. If Guardians was a 9, this was probably like a 7, which is still enough for me to enjoy seeing it. So it was
Hey,
not
that's what Movie Bob gave it.
all right then. So, and yeah, so hopefully, if anybody goes to see it, hopefully you have a good time too. I think it actually releases to theaters at the end of this coming week on the 31st. So go see it. Tell me what you think. Send me an email. But with that in mind, I'm going to take one last pill and go fall asleep in the next 2 minutes. You guys have a good night.
Night B. Take a pill. Be somebody. I don't know where that's from, but my parents, mom especially, says it all the time. So it's got to be something from back in the day.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know if it's some sort of like ad campaign or some kind of like running joke from a movie or a show, or I don't know. If you know, let me know. Because I'm pretty sure if I ask mom, she'll be like, oh, I don't know. But Dirk, did you doze off? Is that a yes? I think that's a yes. All right. I don't know what to do about Dirk dozing off.
Oh, yeah, I dozed off.
That happens. It's very late.
Leighton recently turned 10, so
So you're sleepy now?
well, yes. It's been, pointing out to him that he's now double digits and everything. So,
Good
but
lord.
yeah,
The
my
second
final
kid is
thought.
10? That's... Good lord.
All right.
Wait,
With
how
that,
old's Penny?
7.
You can tell Dirk's tired because it took him like a full couple seconds to work that out.
Yeah.
That's too many. But all right, not too many seconds. That's too many years. Could you tell Penny to stop for a few minutes?
I'll try.
Okay, go to bed, Dirk.
Hi, guys.
Good night.
Poor Dirk. Yeah, I noticed that his icon had gone idle, and I was like, oh no. Well, Mike, as usual, it's just us in chat.
Yeah, right.
I think I've rattled off all of the things I wanted to mention, by and large. How about you?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. I it came up briefly before, but yeah, I think it's wise to save peripherals for another topic.
Yeah, because especially in like the NES era, dude. Have you ever seen the Rollin' Rocker? Look up the Rollin' Rocker.
Roland Rocker, okay.
Or the U-Force. Or the, I can't remember the headset thing. Oh, I can see it, but I can't remember what it's called.
I think Animal showed me some weird keyboard controller attachment for the Dreamcast
Yep.
that was used to play Typing of the Dead. It
Yep.
also served as a keyboard, but it's like, what the heck?
Yeah, and in the Dreamcast version, if you were using it, all of your characters had that instead of guns in the actual game.
Oh wow, I had no idea. He didn't show me the game; he just showed me the thing, and I'm like, okay.
They had like little backpacks and like a little like tray in front of them with a keyboard on it, and you. I hope I'm not making that up. I'm almost certain that's accurate.
It sounds believable.
Yeah. Here it is. Okay, I googled it, and that is exactly what it is. I love it. But yeah, so What are your final thoughts then, Mr. Beard?
Final thoughts. It's good when an expansion for a game can really freshen up the original, especially when you like it. You've been playing it a lot. I'm I'm sure that for people who really like Catan, the expansions to that just keep it from getting played out. After a while, especially if you have a core group of people who play together a lot, it might feel that some games just get like, yeah, you're not sure how much enjoyment you're going to get from playing another one because it's just going to play out like so many of the others before it, after you've gotten so much practice in that mode. But a good expansion that adds some really neat stuff and shakes things up can really breathe life into a game that you already love. Those are really the best kind.
Yeah, they are.
Sometimes it can be something as small as buying another song for $2 that you end up really enjoying playing with your friends.
It's true. We did a lot of that.
We did a whole lot of that.
Like, I'm sad that I never got any kind of like Xbox One or whatever in Rock Band. I guess that would have been 4 to keep playing with all of that DLC, because I have a lot, but I think we got all the use out of it we needed to. Me and you and Scott and Angela, and yeah.
And when I was on the microphone, I added those songs I had you buy to almost every set that I did, just because I enjoy them so much.
He did. Man, I remember when I used to play video games with people. Those were the days.
Oh, man, I can't believe I haven't told you about this yet. So because I've been lazy about changing my tax withholding since Ashley and I have gotten married, we've been getting kind of ridiculous tax returns each year. And we've been using that for, vacations and special stuff and whatever.
New laptop.
But what?
Nothing.
We decided to get ourselves an Oculus. We haven't taken it out of the box yet to set up, but we have it. It's here.
Dude, you should use my code so we both get $30.
Oh, okay, cool.
When you set up your account.
Okay, cool. Thanks for telling me about that.
There's a link.
Okay.
It's I don't know how to do it anymore. I think it's in my link tree. TheManaPool.com. Yeah. So if you go to TheManaPool.com, there's the link right there you can use.
Okay, awesome. I'll tell Ashley about that.
I think you have to do it when you set up your Oculus account or something, because I had one, but I set up my account thinking, okay, I'll use this code and get the money later, and it was like, oh, you already set up your account. And I was like, bitch. It's like... Well, I'll never see Mike and Ashley again.
But now, we might be able to do some multiplayer stuff.
I don't know how much
Ashley
multiplayer.
was excited about that prospect.
I don't know how much multiplayer stuff there is.
Yeah, I don't know either, but she was excited about that possibility.
Swarm has multiplayer stuff, and we all love Swarm.
Yeah.
There's also Demio, which is like a weird VR miniatures game, I want to say. Or something. Oh, well, we'll get in. We'll figure that out later. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm surprised I hadn't remembered to tell you about that yet.
Right? Yeah, if you guys got it already, y'all must have ordered it like a while ago.
It didn't take long to get here after we ordered it. It came in 2 pieces. We did decide to get the the nicer strap with the extra battery pack like you have.
Yeah.
Because like even the photo of the basic version, we're like, yeah, it looks like a piece of crap. let's let's get the nice one.
Yeah, all of the weight being on your face is also awful.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Well, that's cool.
Okay.
So is that
There's my final thoughts. Yes.
okay? So, before I give mine, let's do the patreon.com/themanapool thing. You know the deal by now. Let me thank our mythic lifeguards in whatever this default order is. I didn't even click anything. So, Al, Kim Ho, Scuzzo, John Parker, Jake Jansons, Beardy Man, Team You Hellas Are You, Jason Kaus, Andrew Hunt, Cody Buckowing, Casey. It's Casey's birthday. Happy birthday, Casey. Not that she might listen to this one. Pinball Witch, Jason Doan, Mr. Dr. Lewis, Connor Kennedy, ALK Alters, and Andrew Odie. Yay. Thank you all so very much for your support and all the lifeguards at every tier, of course. As for my final thought, so I'm going to be on the cutting edge for a change, and I'm going to be streaming the Resident Evil 4 remake starting, well, tomorrow, but for anyone listening to this later, that won't matter. But it comes out tomorrow, so I'm going to start streaming it tomorrow. And that's crazy to me, to be playing a game when it comes out. Because that's not a thing that I do. I usually wait for a while until it's cheaper to play. But I do want to thank, let's see, Jay Spencer and JT Huffy and Ben and Kim Ho for helping me purchase it with my broke ass. Well, I guess they didn't help me purchase it. They purchased it. I purchased it, and then they gave me money. They're like, I'll throw in $10. Hey, I'll throw in $10. I was like, oh, sweet. So, yay, new game. I don't know how, like, the demo is 10 gigs. Like, Resident Evil 4 is just under 13 gigs. The demo for the remake is 10. I'm gonna guess it's gonna be up here with, like, Spider-Man and Doom in the 60s. Maybe the 70s, like Hitman. But Hitman is 3 games. So... It's gonna be big. But yeah. And I'm still gonna be streaming Spider-Man until I finish it. I asked Bill and Clues, hey, did you guys play the Spider-Man DLC? And Clues went, I think so. And Bill went, yeah, it was fun. You know, it's more stuff. And yeah, it was fun. It gave me more things to do with my fully powered Spider-Man. I was like, well, that's what DLC is supposed to do. So, yeah. But it still tripped me out that other than, like, Breath of the Wild and, I didn't mention, Casey told me her sister really loved the Ghost of Tsushima expansion, Iki Island. But, like, and Ghost of Tsushima is just, I think, 2 years old. Something like that. So that was the most recent game that anyone mentioned when I asked for favorite DLC. Everyone else was like, oh yeah, from, to late 2000s to mid 2010s. So I still think, and these are people of, I don't want to say many different ages, but not all of these people were my age. So I don't think it's just nostalgia. I think DLCs were just better then. I might have to do put more thought into this and find examples and whatnot. But nobody mentioned Final Fantasy VII or Spider-Man, or I don't even know if the current God of War games have any DLC. I don't even know. But it just tripped me out that everybody was talking about old stuff. Or indie games, which are the future.
Yeah.
They are the hope. But anyway. What else am I working my way through? So Resident Evil 4 remake. Mike, I finally played through Separate Ways and Assignment Ada on Resident Evil 4 for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And unlocked all of the stuff and started a new game in their regular campaign with Leon in his gangster uniform and Ashley in her suit of armor. And then I played through the village and a little bit past that, and finally was able to sell all of my other weapons and buy the Chicago typewriter. Because the Chicago typewriter costs 1,000,000 pesetas.
Yeah.
And if I sold everything, I had 960 some pesetas. So I said crap and reloaded. But it's ridiculous because it's got infinite ammo and most things die in one hit. And so it's just a spray and pray. And I kept saying, keep the change, you filthy animal. Because, I grew up watching Home Alone. The Chicago typewriter, for those who don't know, is a Tommy gun in Resident Evil 4. And it is hilarious. And then I finally unlocked Ashley in her suit of armor. And I saved and then shot at her. And she just bounces off. She's like, oh, and that's it. And I was like, ah! Because in the regular game, when you point a gun towards Ashley, she ducks and covers her head to get out of the line of fire. In this, when you point a gun at Ashley, the visor on her helmet clamps down over her face. And that's it. And she's bulletproof, and enemies can't pick her up and carry her off because she's too heavy. If they try to pick her up, she just crushes them, and they fall down. And, it was so silly. I loved it. So I'm probably going to keep playing that in my own time because I want to save up enough money to also get the Infinite Launcher, which is a rocket launcher with infinite ammo that also costs 1,000,000 pesetas. I don't think I'm going to get enough in one playthrough, but I'm going to try, damn it. Because I can sell literally every piece of ammo I find because I don't need it because I have a Chicago freaking typewriter. So yeah, that's been a trip. But anyway, yeah, so I'm going to keep playing Spider-Man once I get through enough of Resident Evil 4 that I get sick of it, which will probably take 2 or 3 streams, probably. I'm still playing Hitman. I'm going to do more of that on stream at some point, I think. And yeah, at some point I'm going to start Doom 2016. I was going to start it after I finish original Resident Evil 4, but now I got Remake, and so one of these days, though, I will finally get into that. Damn it. But okay, we have rambled on long enough. So be sure to let us know if we didn't mention your favorite or least favorite DLC, then be sure to let us know in the Discord or on Twitter or in the comments or wherever. Send us an email. No one does that anymore. Let us know what we missed and if you loved or hated it, why you loved or hated it. Because I'm always fascinated by that sort of thing. Like, don't just say, oh, this was really good. No, let me know what about it was really good or really bad or whatever. Yeah. But okay. So this has been the Manipool number 673. Wow, this is a long one. Thank you all so very much for joining us, and don't do season passes, or do. It's your money, but you're not helping.